So most people know how generics work with TypeScript and a lot of programming languages. So the way generics work is sometimes you want to have a function that takes in a type of parameter that you don't know what it is because it could be any type, but you will know when you call the function and you want it to return or use that type and keep it typed when you return it. For example, let's say I have a function here and all it does is it returns the first element in a list that it's given. It doesn't know what the list is. It just knows it's a list of any type. What we can do is we can use these brackets here and say that this is T. That's a generic. It could be anything. Given this type right here, this function takes a list of type T and returns one single T. The way you can use this is, say you had a bunch of tabs in an application and the possible values for the tab can be first or second. And here's the actual tabs list right here. You can see this works out as a type. And you want to pick one item out of those tabs. Now I want to make sure that pick one tabs is going to return something of type tab up here. So instead of having to type it out like this, which would be annoying to have to do every single time to preserve that type, the generic will actually pick up on what type tabs is automatically and return it. So you can see here tab is typed by my IDE. What most people do not know though is you can also do this with React components. So this is a really cool trick. This lets you safely type stuff when you're writing your components. For example, if you are writing a list of radio buttons and the user can select any one of the radio buttons and you want to preserve the type of values that are being passed into that, you can use this trick here so that the type is preserved and you don't have to manually type it out. Without this type hint here, if it was just a list of strings, which would look like this, you can see here that now all I know is that on item clicked is just a string and I don't know what that string is actually going to be. This is an issue if you do something like this. Say you have a selected button. Let's do that as a use state. Selected button, set selected button. And we are going to have this be the very first button by default, right? And what's going to happen is, and let's type this out as a button type. So type buttons. And here's an example of where having a generically typed component is especially useful. If I have a use state right here and the possible values for this is going to just be button or null, where button is going to be first or second. You can see if I hover over button right here, you can see it says first or second. Those are the only two allowed types for button. And I changed on item clicked to instead do, given my item, let's go ahead and set selected button item. It's going to give me an error here because all we know about item is normally it's just a string, right? That is how it's defined up here. It takes in a list of strings, and when one gets clicked, it's going to call the onItem clicked function with a string. That is not accurate enough. Now I could cast it as button, and that works just fine, but that's ugly, and I'd have to do that every single time I would use that somewhere. So instead what you can do is you can add in a generic. So we're going to say that it takes any type that extends string, which means that they can only pass in strings. Then we're going to say that the items has to be a list of that T type, that generic type. And the item is going to be that T type. Now you can see that error is gone here, and my IDE is even type hinting saying that item is going to be a first or second value, and I'm no longer getting errors. So that's just how that's useful. TypeScript automatically picks up the type of T. You don't have to give it that type directly, but there actually is a way if you wanted to. It looks really weird, but this is also valid right here. You can tell it specifically that this is a type of button if for whatever reason it can't pick it up or imply it from this list being a specific type.